Thank you for watching the Housing Oregon YouTube channel. Be sure to join our network and get involved in the work that we are doing. If you can, please like and subscribe. It helps us build this channel, which serves as a platform to communicate with our members. This video is part of our 2025 annual conference. We're looking for folks to be on the conference planning committee. Please email info@housingoregon.org.
Hello, good morning. We've got a mic. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Yeah, it's only like the second panel of the day, so people still have energy. Thank you so much for coming to this Finding Home, Lasting Housing Solutions Rooted in Community Expertise panel. My name is Molly Hogan, and I'm with the Welcome Home Coalition. We're a multicultural alliance of organizations and individuals building a housing justice movement in the Portland Metro. And I actually was not supposed to be the panelist for this today, but our wonderful colleague Lauren came down with COVID at the last minute. So I'm stepping in with her, but I just wanted to share that with you all because I'm going to go over the project, but I want to be transparent that I wasn't actually welcome. Come on in, find a seat. That I wasn't involved with this project in the very beginning, so I'm going to be telling someone else's story. And this project is deeply about trying to do better at not telling other people's stories, right? This project is rooted in like talking to people experiencing homelessness in the Portland metro area and finding out what they say they need because they are experts in their life. And so I just want to let you all know that I am not necessarily an expert in this project, but I have been working on it for the last 5 months, and so I think I can do it justice a little, right? And I'm going to look to Katie because she was involved in it for longer than me. So I might tap you during this, Katie. So let's see. So right, I already kind of touched on that, what this project was. So it was basically like, we hear policymakers all the time talking about, how do we solve homelessness? How do we solve homelessness? Like, when was the last time you asked a person who's been homeless in the last 5 years how the systems in the Portland Metro are working? And those are the people that know best where the bottlenecks are, what's not working for them, what is working for them is really exciting, because more of that, please, right? So this project was spearheaded by Sisters of the Road. Oh, okay, sorry, these are also not my slides. So let me do these slides justice. So our agenda for today is describing the project and then describing the methodology for y'all, showing you some of the data, and welcome, Aiden. Join us up here. Aiden also worked on this project. Some policy recommendations that came out of the project, and then you'll hear from this lovely set of panelists and have a chance to ask questions. So let's see. So Sisters of the Road, if you're not familiar with that organization, they have been an institution in the community of folks experiencing homelessness in Portland for decades. They have a cafe, which sadly went away during COVID, but for decades they had a cafe in Old Town in downtown Portland where folks could come and get a meal. They accepted SNAP, food stamps, or you could do some work trade for your meal. And that model really creates community, right? Not just standing in the line and getting food and having it be transactional, but really building community. So Sisters is really known in the Portland area for, I know when I've talked to folks living on the street, Sisters comes up. They say, Sisters feels like love. Sisters feels like I feel seen. I feel like a human when I interact with Sisters staff. And so, as I said, sadly, the cafe went away during COVID, and Sisters wanted to revisit their advocacy priorities, because part of Sisters' history has also been movement building and really authentically building movement with people most impacted, people experiencing homelessness coming up with their own policy advocacy campaigns and putting pressure on the city. And so this specific project, Finding Home, was inspired by a project done in Denver. And that report is called Pipe Dreams and Picket Fences, if you want to look it up. And it was also inspired by a University of California, San Francisco study. And both these studies, right, uses participatory action research models. And so participatory action research is rooted in really trying to be less extractive in research, right? And I also want to say, like, I think I'm talking to a group of friends in this. You all work in the sector. You're deeply involved. That it's frustrating, right, to think like more research. Like do we really need any more research to know that what homeless people say they need is housing and support services? But we are at a place where, we still need research. And so the goal of this project too, and participatory action research models in general, is to include people more authentically in the whole research process, right? Because we know that marginalized communities often get surveyed. They get, million intake forms, tell us all about your life, tell us what you want and need, and nothing materially changes in their life. And that feels very extractive, it feels crappy, and it also then causes distrust for participation in any kind of like civic engagement going forward. So this model chooses to try to not do that. Sorry, I was trying to think of like some smarter word to say than not do that, but we're trying to not do that. So the vision was born at Sisters in 2022, and so they researched the different methods that had been used. They worked with PSU Masters of Social Work students and professors. They had interns to compare different housing programs, and they used that, preliminary research to help design the type of questions they wanted to ask. So then from May to October 23, they worked on the design, creating the tools and how they were going to go out and actually perform this survey. Then from November 23 to June 24, there was the actual planning that went into like recruiting sites, to fundraising money, to, right, like all survey participants were given stipends. If there's ever a survey that doesn't pay somebody these days, those people are way behind. Like, at least pay people for their time. And then in the summer of 2024 and into early fall, outreach workers with lived experience of homelessness actually went out to homeless drop-in centers around the Portland metro area and collected responses from 429 people. So this is also a statistically significant size. So when we think about data and big picture, right, often I feel like the opinions of people experiencing homelessness get brushed off by policymakers because they say, well, that's your story, that's anecdotal. And so also we're hoping that this project will show this is a big data set, and there's some, yes, there's unique stories, not everybody is the same, but we can see some big picture patterns in this data. And then January through March, the beginning of this year, there was some focus groups, right, to complement the survey process. You all know what focus groups are, small groups of people coming in a room, having a longer deep dive conversation for a few hours. And then I'd say this is where Welcome Home joined in the project. Sisters had some decrease in staffing and some capacity issues. So at Welcome Home, we said, oh, well, this is right up our alley. So we'll go ahead and take this project to the finish line. We don't want this data to just get lost and not used because it's so powerful to influence regional policy to address homelessness. So we stepped in at this point, and this is where So the data collected from the survey was coded and analyzed by an OHSU public health intern. So we are so grateful. Hunter Ladd, is Hunter in the room? I don't see him. No, okay. He's not. Okay. And after we put that data together, we held community analysis groups, right? And so this was the first step after initial data collection to bring the data back to people most impacted and say, what do you think, right? So not just like take the survey with your own individual experience, but then get a chance to look at the collective data. So we held 4 community analysis groups for a collective of almost 40 people participated in those. And they were 3-hour sessions, and we had a PowerPoint slide of the data and asked folks, what's standing out to you about this data, and what do you think policy solutions are to this? And the goal of that was that our suggested policy recommendations would really be grounded in the expertise of people that had lived the experience of homelessness recently or actively in the Portland area. So then in July this summer, we did 5 data walks. And that was then, okay, we got this feedback from the community analysis group, so then we came up with like, okay, we think these are some policy recommendations. But we still want to bring these policy recommendations back to even more community and gut check it with them, right? So we made big posters of the data, and then we had these blank posters, like big pieces of paper, and on those blank ones we wrote our suggested policy recommendations, and then we said, do you agree or not, why or why not? And then we had 215 people go through those posters at drop-in centers and react in real time. I called them the graffiti posters, and they would graffiti on the blank ones, and we'd have conversation, right? And we know there was 215 people because we gave them all gift cards in that process to participate in that. So we tracked how many people. So that was really exciting because it gave us a chance to, there was a lot of validation of, one of our policy recommendations, right? It was like more rent assistance. And everyone's like, hell yeah, right? We didn't get a lot of pushback on that one. But we did, from that experience, welcome. We heard a couple things that jumped out that didn't really jump out in the quantitative survey data. And that was people talking about the desire for job assistance, whether help like learning a new trade or education or getting a job and keeping a job, because so many folks said, yeah, I need rent assistance now, and I like to get out of this situation, but I don't want the government paying my rent forever, right? And then we also heard that is one group of folks, and then another group of folks, right, are like, I'm never going to re-enter the workforce, and I just need my rent paid forever. And then we heard more folks talking about recovery services in those data walk experiences, which like in the data, as you'll see later in the slides, about a third of people brought up recovery services, but it didn't like pop out real strong. So those two, from that data walk experience, we were able to incorporate in our final report, which we're releasing next month. There's some one-pagers that we'll pass out that give you an overview of the report, but the whole long 40-page report is coming out next month. And if we hadn't gone back to community and gut checked with them, we wouldn't have like heard this rich feedback that was like very necessary that we incorporated it. So so October 23rd, we're having a party. If anybody wants to come, sign up for our email list, and we'll send you an invite. We're gonna have a party with the data. Nobody reads reports, so we said, let's have a party. And then maybe some of these, and we invited some elected officials. Even the mayor of Portland is coming, which he hasn't been super pleased with our welcome home lately because we've been giving him a little bit of grief about him spending $28 million to expand overnight shelters. We think that money could be spent on more effective solutions that also folks experiencing homelessness say they need and want. I think I'm talking too long. I'm going to try to speed up. So the framework for community-based participatory action, right, is participation, collaboration, that's that co-creation of knowledge, and that iterative process, right, that back and forth process of reflection with the people that are actually living this issue. And then the action, right, hopefully goes beyond just like we're going to have our report release, we're going to have these policy recommendations, but then like a continuous improvement and adaptation based on community feedback. And I'm going to give a shout out to Rigoberto from Centro Cultural in the audience, because he gave a fantastic workshop yesterday about continuous improvement in agencies, right, and in community-based organizations. And all during your workshop, I thought about this on the system scale, the macro system scale, right? And I think it's a both and. So the main research questions of this project was, what type of housing do people experiencing homelessness want? Pretty basic, right? And then what types of housing policies and programs are there? And how well do people currently or recently experience homelessness understand these housing policies and programs that are available? And then the last research question is really do our policymakers' choices, the policies they're enacting, match what people experiencing homelessness say they need and want, right? And this goes to our recent campaign to the mayor of Portland. Our argument is like, your policy action is not matching what people are saying they need and want. The disconnect there. And then we also wanted to know, who do people think is responsible for the housing system and ensuring that we have a healthy housing system? So, sorry, I just feel like I'm just talking way too much. So qualitative, quantitative, y'all are pretty familiar. Quantitative, the numbers game. Ask people, there was some just drop-down questions, pick 3, that's it, that's all you get. Qualitative methods, more conversational, those focus groups, those community analysis groups, those data walks. Here's a picture at Street Roots of the survey being asked to folks. There was 2 pilot surveys to test the instrument before doing the full rollout, which is also really cool. So like things that were like, ooh, people didn't react to this wording very well, let's tweak it and make it more accessible, right? Plain language, or that's the part I wasn't participating in, so I'm not gonna actually speak too much to that, but that's what I assume happened. So yeah, over the course of 7 weeks, 3 cohorts of 12 outreach workers, they were trained and performed the survey with 429 people. They had iPads, they were going out to drop-in centers, talking to people one-on-one. And then data professionals, right, the OHSU biostats intern. We also brought on a couple consultants because we don't have enough staff in Welcome Home staff to do all that data crunching, and we wanted to make sure we know that this report will be attacked by policymakers and try to be written off that this isn't quote unquote professional or academic enough or scientific enough. And because that's right how the dominant society and the status quo operates, right? Things based in feelings and emotions and are considered not as important or real. And like that's BS in our opinion, but that's the reality we're living in, right? So taking all measures to have this be taken as seriously as it can possibly be. So I already talked about the community analysis groups. This is just a slide describing it. Anybody have any questions about this community analysis group before I move on? I realize that's just a natural flow. No? Okay. Data walk. So see, this is what the graffiti poster looks like. Isn't it cool? I just like the way it artistically looks. Like lots of people's different thoughts, kind of messy. But we did have a very actually rigorous, organized method of all these messy Post-it notes. We took them all off and put them in Ziploc bags and labeled them with the question, and then put them all in a spreadsheet so we could, and then saw patterns, right? I love this quote. There's pictures of us doing the data walks. This one woman, I actually remember this, I was talking to her, and she said, you know, they always say that for my mental health, I need to like engage in, quote, community. But then they put me in this like super isolated studio apartment and like no one checks on me. And I feel so lonely. And I don't like, but then they tell me that I'm supposed to be engaging with community for my mental health and then blame me for having mental health episodes and challenging behavior. And I just thought that was like, that's the kind of rich feedback that policymakers need to listen to, right? This whole conference right now is about housing design and the types of housing we build in affordable housing and and then the actual experience of the people living in that housing gets so lost in the process. And so that is deeply at Welcome Home. What we talk about and care about is bringing that actual experience into the big picture policy and development conversation. So here's some of the data. So 429 people took the survey. This is where they lived. They were asked, where do you live at the time of taking the survey? So you can see the majority of the people lived outside, the little tent icons. Next to that, the little shelter bed. Sanctioned encampment is like the government-run encampments. Some folks were housed. And then we got people living in their cars or with family and friends and others variety. Some high-level demographics. The majority of folks reported living with some kind of disability. The biggest age demographic was 25 to 54. Not surprisingly, race and ethnicity was, largely white. That said, there was, we know that black folks surveyed at a rate higher than what they represent in the general population. And gender, it was predominantly cisgendered men, as you can see from the slide. And all of these things kind of are probably not super shocking because when we walk down the street in Portland and see who's homeless, these demographics kind of mirror that reality. And so folks were asked, when you think of wanting housing, what do you think of? And as you can see, the number one, this was an open-ended question that was coded, so people gave, whatever sentence description they wanted. And overwhelmingly, people's responses had something to do with safety and security, right? Housing represents safety and security. It also represents some kind of permanency. And the second most common was people describing like the type of housing, right? Like what it actually looked like to them. And this one, so we've actually already shared this data in a brief we released in April that we shopped around when we were trying to get the mayor to kind of pivot off just spending so much dang money on expanding congregate overnight shelters and say, please spend some of it on rent assistance and peer support specialists. Because folks were asked, what's your most and least preferred housing type, right? And so, as you can see, like shelter, an RV, an SRO, a tent, living outside was included in a housing, quote unquote, type, right? And most preferred were apartment, house, tiny home. Least preferred were shelter or living outside or living at a managed sanctioned encampment run by a government agency, right? So interestingly, shelter and living outside, people said they least preferred at the same rate. The same rate of folks said both. So at the end of the day, we know that there are certain types of shelter that meet folks' needs more, and there are elements of those shelters needed. But congregate overnight, just a spot to be on a cot from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. are not fulfilling those needs. And at the end of the day, shelter is a temporary solution that can be helpful for folks, but it is not a home. And so 91% of respondents said they'd move into a home if they could afford it at their current income. And then that 9%, we kind of dove deeper into that 9%, and some of those folks said their answer was like, well, I don't have any money. And so that was interesting to us because that shows how deeply, capitalism is ingrained in all of us, that they thought they couldn't imagine that housing would cost $0. So they said, well, I don't have any income, so I'm never going to afford any housing, right? So it'd probably be a little higher than 91% if folks realized that some housing for $0 does exist. And then we asked folks, right, we know that people get housing and often lose it, and that is a really traumatic revolving door that our system is creating. And so we asked, what supports do you need to stay housed? Number one answer, 9 in 10 people said rent assistance. And then the second most common answer is government benefits, help applying for SNAP, disability. So at the end of the day, right, people need money because the rent is too dang high. But then the third most common answer was the ability to have family and friends and your people around, because people need people. We're social creatures. And a lot of our subsidized housing has really strict rules about guests, creates really, like that one woman said, they tell me to engage in community and with people, and then they put me in really socially isolated housing. I'm going to keep going because I just think these brilliant people will speak more deeply to this data. So we asked people about deal breakers. If you were offered housing, is there things that you would say, actually, no, thank you, right? A lot of times, working poor people and poor people are expected to not have personal preference, and that's absolutely not cool. All human beings have personal preference. So folks, and there's real tangible reason, like for why a curfew won't work for somebody, they might work the night shift. So how are they gonna live in that housing and work the night shift? We also asked, what do you think the government could do about housing to address homelessness? Number one answer was more housing, more options. Second most common answer was listen to people experiencing homelessness more in your policy creation. So these are what we came up with, folks. It'll be interesting to see y'all's responses. So on a really high level, 4 buckets. Direct housing stability support. We need better restriction on local rent increases, right? Rent in the Portland Metro between the year 21 and 22 had the highest rental increase of any urban city in the nation, y'all. It was 39%, double the national average. And sometimes people get confused by that because, hey, we have a state law that says 10% rent cap. But that rent cap is only good on one lease. So in between leases, landlords can increase the rent as high as they want, 100%, 200%, whatever. And so and then it also only covers housing that is, older than 15 years old. So we've had a lot of new housing developed in the last 15 years, and none of that housing is held to this rent restriction law. Increased funding for rent assistance, including eviction prevention rent assistance, right? More people are falling into homelessness than are being housed every day. Peer support specialists are essential, and streamlining the housing access process. Supportive services and human-centered approaches, right? Investing in workforce development, recovery-oriented housing, non-police emergency responders, and making sure that people that are getting rent assistance are getting those support services. We hear a lot that folks aren't actually getting the support services once they're housed, and the CBOs are just don't have enough staff to like make that the reality that it should be and needs to be. And that often programs expire after a year, and a year is often not long enough for folks to really stabilize. Housing supply and affordability initiatives. We want to see more innovative social housing models implemented that increase housing that's outside of the private market. We want to see more buildings being purchased and converted. We just saw that happen in the city this summer. There was actually 4 apartment buildings that private developers sold at half the cost. There's a phenomenon happening. Nobody can afford their $2,500, $3,000 a month rent, and they're trying to offload them. And public agencies and nonprofits that have money can buy them and convert them to deeper affordability. And lastly, community voice and governance is hugely important in public policy. So we're asking that public policy makers include folks with lived expertise in budget and policy planning processes in an authentic way. All right, now I get to do this. I'm so excited. I'm so sorry that I talked so much. But I think it was important stuff. So this fantastic panel, see, that's who's supposed to be here, Lauren. not me. Um, I will let them introduce themselves. Um, and so please introduce yourself with your name, your organization or affiliations, and what brought you to this research project.
Hi, my name is Amon Rutherford. My organization is Welcome Home. What brought me here is I'm a person with lived experience, and I will pass it off to you.
Good morning. My name is Crystal Magana, and I'm part of Welcome Home Coalition. And what brought me here is my lived experience and that I want to see change. And I was part of the data analysis to help push these policies forward. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Crystal Delahanty. I'm the founder and executive director of PDX Saints Love. I am also a person with lived experience, and I've spent the last years in direct service. The reason I wanted to work on this project with a Welcome Home is that historically we are not seeing people who are actually experiencing homelessness to hear their voice or see their voice at the table when these policies are being made.
It's heavy. My name is Aiden Campbell, and I'm a person with lived experience also. I was just harassing Molly about contract work, and she was like, oh, I have something you might be interested in. So that's how I got here.
Can you tell them what you did?
Huh?
Can you tell them what you did?
Oh, I was one of the people that helped write the report, which was a pretty amazing experience. Yes.
Awesome. So now let's get into it. So can y'all share what was a game changer in your experience trying to get out of homelessness, or perhaps not? What has been your experience in the systems, the homeless service systems and housing systems in the Portland metro area?
Well, I'm one of them people that most people get homeless because of fall on short times or hard times. I'm not one of those people. I've never been homeless in my life. I've had housing for 21 years. The mother of my child claimed things that I didn't do, and she got a DV grant, and I had to give up my housing or go to jail in my mind frame. So I went to Alaska, came back here to fight for my kids, and I had to be homeless behind trying to fight for my children. So I don't like the live experience, but I believe everything happened for a reason, and I'm here to show my experiences. Been homeless for a year. I have 3 jobs. I don't think I should be homeless. Work for the Portland Trailblazers, safe transportation. Just got a job for hygiene for all, and I'm still in the position that I am right now. So I'm just here to say that everybody is not homeless because of mental health, because of poverty, or things of that nature. Sometimes the system puts us in the situation that we're in. So I'm hoping that you guys have a little empathy for me and people like me. And as I was coming here today, I seen a gentleman sitting on the streets, and he had a Bible right there, and I stopped and prayed for him. And as a person that's in the Banfield shelter, I seen a gentleman come into my shelter, and he was bleeding everywhere. And I was asking him to get help. He didn't want to get help, but as the position that I'm in, I had to get him help anyway. And it just shows some of the things that people are going through, living in the situation that I'm living in right now.
For me, I served 16 and a half years in prison, and in the beginning, the game changer when I paroled was programs. For example, the Family Preservation Project, which is the only holistic program around that helps moms and kiddos to reunite, and because of them, I have a relationship with my daughter today and my grandkids. Also, the Oregon Tradeswomen Pre-Apprenticeship Program, I went through that program and joined Local 29 Ironworkers Union, where I'm still a part of that union. But then in my situation, my first call out, I was dominoed by 5 I-beams on the job that caused me to lose my benefits, to lose the income that I was making at the time, which was almost $3,000 after taxes a week, and then put me on to workman's comp. And at that point in time, I lost housing because nobody will rent to someone with workman's comp, even though it's now a little over 9 years later and I'm still waiting for one more back surgery so that I can return to work. I'm not a person with drug addictions. I'm not a person with alcoholism. I live life on life's terms. I pay my bills. I pay taxes. I do all the things. And so right now, because of that, I live with friends and family, and thank God for them, because if I didn't have them, I would be in an overnight shelter, or I would, who knows where I would be, you know? And so I thank God every day, because my faith is what keeps me going. And I'm here and part of this coalition and other committees because something has to change. Like, this isn't right. And the people that are in positions of power and the people that have the money don't get it. They're so far removed from the actual real thing of what's going on, and they just see someone with this mental health situation, or they chose drugs or whatever. They don't see us. And so that's why we're all here. Is we know that all of you guys here in this room are here because you care and you're involved in programs, or you have someone that you love and care about. And that's why you're here, because you want to figure out other ways to do your part. But this is also why all of us go and do lobbying and talk to those people that are up there in the Capitol that make the good money and are sitting in this little nice office and driving their nice car and all of that, so that they see us, because we are the face of homelessness. Thank you.
For me, my homelessness was a little less than 2 years, actually, but it actually spanned over and over a couple of decades. I actually did have substance use, but my substance use started because I grew up for the first 16 years of my life in a severely physically abusive household where my jaw was broken, my spine was broken. I have spondylolisthesis that I'll have the rest of my life. I have fibromyalgia. And so in my early 20s, I was prescribed Dilaudid, and eventually that turned into Oxycontin. And then eventually my doctor actually lost her license for overprescribing, and I ended up on heroin within a year. And so I had almost 2 decades of opiate addiction, and for a really long time was able to hold on to some sort of housing. But in all of that time, I had always felt isolated and rejected from community. So the game changer, whenever I actually came into recovery and housing, was that community care, belonging to a people. So I had peers that came and walked with me, like, what does it look like to, I need to get my ID, I need to get my birth certificate. It's really hot in this house. Like, I haven't been in a house for a couple of years, and like bringing me an air conditioner, things as simple as that. It was that supportive community care that kept me in there for that first year, or I may have walked away.
Keep going.
You're back here, Crystal. Thank you all for sharing. I actually want the room to can y'all do a collective exercise with me, because these 3 folks were just so freaking vulnerable, and vulnerability that's the power. That's what changes. That's what changes hearts and minds. So if y'all can close your eyes, everybody, and feel your feet on the floor. Take a deep breath. Just breathe, ground in your body. And if people can just shout out words that describe how you felt listening to these 3 folks.
Care.
Love. Thank you all. Thank you for your strength and bravery every day. So now we're going to get a little technical on the project. Can you speak about your involvement in the project and why it mattered to you? So participating in the community analysis.
I can, but I'm glad we just took a second to be able to say these words, because I've been faced last week with a kind of hard situation. A gentleman just passed, and he's an activist, and I don't believe anybody should die for standing up on their truth, even if you don't agree with it. But a lot of people in my community has been shitting on me, basically, for supporting the man for not supposed to die. So I'm hoping we can say a prayer out for that gentleman as well. But my involvement was before, when I first got into it, I didn't know none of the stuff we was talking about. So when they start to say, hey, we cared about your lived experience, then it was like I felt, okay, I can tell you about my lived experience and what I'm going through and why I'm in the situation I'm in. And I was happy that my voice was able to be heard. But I can't totally answer the questions too much because I'm still in the situation I'm in right now. So I'm hoping that I can be a change by next year or something like that. But right now, I'm still living the experience. I think I'm probably the only one in the room, in the building, that's actually living that experience. But I thank God that I can wake up every day and still try for another day tomorrow.
This project, the reason why it matters to me is because I want to see sustainable, systematic change, right? Not just overnight, not just for 6 months, but long-lasting change. And the thing about this project is it asked folks like us what we need and how that would look for us. And they heard our voices and they listened and they uplifted our voices. We weren't just tokenized. And as a person going through these things, so often you feel tokenized when people are asking you, oh, how did you become homeless? Or what do you want? Or how could you, what services do you need? Or what do you think you need? And someone else always has something better to tell you of what you need. And that isn't even what the thing is. Or they immediately assume because you have tattoos that, oh, you're gang affiliated. Or because you have scars, oh, you must be a fighter. Or, you know, whatever the thing is, instead of trying to get to know us as an individual and hear what we need. And that's why this project matters to me so much. Thank you.
For us, we were one of the organizations that hosted Sisters of the Road and then Welcome Home Coalition for the initial surveys and then the data walks. We just really wanted our community to be heard. We wanted people who are actually experiencing homelessness. And I was just thinking before I started talking, there was a time the last year of my homelessness, and it was probably the roughest time of my addiction as well. And I remember walking down the street and I started crying. And I said, I wish someone would still see me because I am still in here. I know I don't look like it, but I'm still here. And that was really why. We cannot make policies about people. We can't make offers for people without asking them what they need. When I came into recovery and I came into housing, I was terrified of everything. I spent 16 years being beaten. I don't want to go into a congregate shelter where there are people there that are unpredictable and unexpected. Somebody ask me what I want. Somebody please ask me the things that I need. And so that was the importance of supporting this this project, is that the people that we see every day coming in and out of our day center, we wanted them to be heard because they are still in there and they matter.
So one of the things that, well, I've realized quite a few things working on this project, but one of the biggest things was that even though I'm a person with lived experience, I've worked in housing now for over 25 years, and I've always crossed coworkers that have told me, even though they know that I have lived experience, is that people that live on the streets want to live on the streets. People that use drugs because they want to use drugs. People that have mental health issues, they don't want to take their medication, right? Like, it's always blame the person that is living this marginalized life, being oppressed in so many ways. This shatters all of that, and it came from people themselves. No, we want to live in homes. If I had the money, I would live in an apartment today. I don't want to live in a shelter because I've been abused so much. I've been attacked in shelters before. No one wants to live in a shelter, right? And if you're in a shelter, you're still unhoused, you're still homeless. So building more shelters does not, you know, take away the homeless problem. People are still unhoused. They're just going into a place to sleep overnight. So that was the biggest takeaway from this for me. But also just knowing that so many people had the opportunity to share their experience, and it's written in paper, on paper forever. It's their voice that people will be able to read 25, 30 years into the future. It also reminds me of all the movements that I worked in. The intellectual disability field, Nothing About Us Without Us. When recovery first became this huge thing, when they put behavioral health as one, when it was just mental health before and addictions before, but now it's behavioral health. Their motto also now is nothing about us without us, right? Like, so I see the unhoused community being able to build that community for the future. This is the start of it now, nothing about us without us. So let's make this happen.
So I kind of touched on this earlier, but we see that our local government's policy decisions are not matching what folks told us in this survey, and do not match our policy recommendations. So I'd like to ask the panelists to speak on one or two of the policy recommendations that you feel passionate about and why.
They have an A and B population. I believe like the A population, you have one arm, one leg, something like that. You're able to get some help. I'm in a medical shelter and I have an ingrown hernia on my left side with its inside. I also have gout. I got stabbed in my heart. I have a lot of injuries that's inside. So because it's not shown on the outside, I feel like I'm overlooked. And we lost a lot of fundings, and when I first got in the shelter, they said it'd be a year, they'd pay up your rent from year to 6 months, from 6 months to 3 months, 10 to we'll just pay for you to get inside its place. I need 30% of my income because I have a lot of injuries, and what I'm passionate about is care about the B population, care about us those that have both of our arms but still struggling. So that's what I'm more passionate about.
I'm passionate about all these millions of dollars that are being put towards shelter instead of building affordable, sustainable housing. I understand that we need everyone to have a bed at night, but that doesn't matter if they can't get into affordable housing. If you took even half of that and put it toward affordable housing that included mental health, case management, work training services, you're giving people a foot up and out the door. But when all you're doing is giving them a shelter bed, of course they'd rather stay on the streets, because a lot of these folks are coming from Troutdale, Gresham, and where all these shelter beds are is in downtown Portland. You know, nobody wants to go down there, even the homeless people. There was another group that I'm involved in that we are actively doing surveys with folks that are actively right now in houselessness. And a lot of those people came from the outskirts of Portland metropolitan area only because they found out about the survey and they were getting a gift card for the day. Otherwise, they don't come in because they would rather stay where they're safe, in out in the woods or out in their tents around their community. But when you go into a shelter, you don't know who you're going to be around. And this overnight thing, it's ridiculous. And then it's asinine. But you have to approach it in a holistic manner. You cannot just say, okay, we're going to create affordable housing. You have to give them all of the tools and let them decide what they're ready for, because a lot of folks did not get clean before they got into that housing, what looked like permanent housing for them, whether it was an apartment or a single family home. It was after they got into it. It wasn't before, because once they got into it, then it gave them the encouragement and the, you know what, I want to keep this. I don't want to lose it. So now I'm going to address my mental health. Now I'm going to address these other things. This job isn't working for me. I'm going to be open to a different job training thing. And so it has to be a holistic approach. But even if they took half of that money, then we would be doing a better service to all of the folks that are homeless right now. Thank you.
The largest and most urgent concern I have right now is the balance of shelter versus housing, as Crystal said. I feel like our main policymakers right now have listened to a few stories from, I'm just going to say, from a handful of white men, and asked them, and that is not the main story. They did not seek out the voices of currently unhoused people, women, people of color, or LGBTQIA+ communities, and ask them what they feel safe with when it comes to shelter. Most people, if sheltering, and we saw that in the data walks, would, if they were going to take shelter, it needs to be dignified and it needs to be private, and we see that happening, and it's successful with our current Safe Rest villages. We're spending money on shelter, and there's right now no off-ramp for that. They have invested all of the money in shelter, and as a provider who actually does have an in-reach housing contract where we can go in and meet with shelter participants, we have so little money per participant to move them out. Our city just implemented a policy where if someone enters one of the shelters, they have 120 days to exit. That's 4 months to figure it out. And I have only $9,500 to help you figure it out. And it's not fair, it's not trauma informed, and it's not going to work long term. It's dangerous.
So 2 of the policies, and I don't even know, like, but I'm sure they are in there somewhere.
Are you talking about peer support?
Yes, workforce development, and definitely building more affordable housing. So workforce development is important because so many people want to work, but they can't because they might be working through mental health or addictions. They might have a criminal record, and a lot of people will not hire people with criminal records. Also, when you're unhoused, you might lose your ID, your birth certificate, social security card. Like, having all of that documentation is so important when you're unhoused, and where can you keep it so that it can be safe, so that you can be able to move into workforce development, get a job, part-time job, or go to school or whatever. It's what keeps you housed, but it also is your identity, right? Like, so many of us don't realize how much work is our identity until we lose it or we go into retirement. You know, like, my brother was a police officer for like 25 years, and he was able to retire, but he didn't want to, but he had to because he was, you know, he was sick. But it was his identity to the point that he was willing to, like, drop dead on the job, right? Like, just walking and just dropping dead because it was his identity. And, like, for so many of us, it is our identity. And, like, for people to want to go back to work, we need to figure out how to get them back to work. And that is that workforce development. Oregon Employment Services has lots of programs that we need to start helping people take advantage of because they don't know about those programs. So social service orgs, community-based orgs, need to train their staff on how to be able to support their constituents and to be able to get into those workforce programs. As far as housing is concerned, we need for our organizations and people that work with them that are creatives in these organizations to not be afraid to create and develop new housing models. Like, there is a housing model out there now that has not even been created yet. You all have to do that. Like, we are the people that tell the government what we need. The government shouldn't be telling us what we need because we know what is happening in the community. Unhoused people know what is happening, and we are the experts, not the government. The government has never been the expert, and that is why we're in this situation that we're in now, because we're not in the places where we need to be in the government. We have these people telling us what programs we need with MBAs and PhDs, and that's nice, because I love a PhD. I've dated several of them, and I love them, right?
Go ahead.
But you can't tell me how to get a person into housing because you learned it in a book. I need the person that understands it from a grassroots level. And so for you creative out there that has it in your mind that there's a new housing program that I want to create, but there's no money, there's no org for me, put that shit in a universe and say, here, this is how we can house people, this program. We don't need just one program, we need 50 programs, because every unhoused person you meet is a different individual. And we have to house them based on their needs and their wants.
Awesome. So some time for Q&A. Oh, there's a hand right away. I'm gonna run around with this. Wait, can you hold it so you use the mic? Thank you.
So the first thing I wanted to say was I've been to 5 sessions in the last 2 days, and this is the most meaningful, real, insightful session I've been to, and impactful. So I just wanted to thank the panel for that. And the question I had was, other than income, what are the main barriers to the homeless getting housing?
Crystal, you want to? Can I answer that? Sure. And then I think Crystal too.
One of the main barriers is that not listening to us, not caring about what we have to say. We got to think this thing now they're going to stop having weapons. And that's, I guess, a good thing to not have weapons, but some of those people need those type of things to be able to protect themselves. I'm as a chef, and I can't have my chef knife or my temperature thing because it's considered as a weapon. So I'm in a rock and a hard place because my job wants me to be able to have those things. So we just need to listen to us.
I'm speaking basically for the people that I work with, that when we're trying to house them. So some of the smaller barriers, like the first thing we start working on, and people are living outside and they are moving a lot, so they don't have any kind of identifying documents. So kind of reaching out and replacing all of those. And then we start looking at someone who's been living in poverty for 5-10 years. And so they likely have, a bad credit score, or they have evictions on their record, and then as going on to small theft or criminal charges that really are actually symptoms of being homeless, trying to feed myself, a lot of trespassing charges, kind of things like that we start to whittle away at to get to. The other thing is that rent is extremely high, and you have to make 3 times the amount of rent. And I don't know in Portland where there's, I'm an executive director of a small nonprofit, and I don't make 3 times most of the rent in this city. And so we're expecting people who don't have educations or a long history of work to be able to have income that meets those requirements.
I also have one more thing to say. So you guys heard me say that I went to prison for 16 and a half years. So this is the backstory on that. When I was 14, I was forced into prostitution by the man who is also the father of my only child, my daughter, which she's the biggest blessing in my life, and my grandchildren. But my crime, the night of my crime, I was doing that work, and I defended my life against a trick. And so Oregon does not have self-defense laws for girls like me. So my judge had no choice but to sentence me under Measure 11 for 16 and a half years. Because that is a Measure 11 crime, because it is a person-to-person crime, it can never be expunged off of my record. So at one point in time before I got hurt, I found one landlord that was willing to give me a chance. The deposit on all the application stuff was $1,800. Because of my record, and because I have to, for the rest of my life, Explain that. He wanted $5,000 deposit on top of first and last month's rent to move in and the $500 security deposit. I am on and work with Oregon Justice Resource Center. For any of you who know that, they also go by OJRC, and I work very closely with Bobbin and Julia, husband and wife, that created that nonprofit. And I have went for the last 6 years and testified about why the law needs to be changed and judges need to be given the opportunity to downward depart based on mitigating factors. But that is another piece to the homelessness thing, is people's charges are not being able to be expunged, and nobody understands that. You look at me, and if you met me on the street today and I was wearing long sleeves and you didn't see any of my tattoos, and you had no idea other than today you just saw me, or you saw me in my $80,000 vehicle that I worked my ass off to get, you would never know that I was homeless. You would never know that I was a prostitute as a kid. You would never know those traumas that I had been through. And based on that, you would give me a chance. But then when I have to explain myself because of the criminal background checks and all of that, it's bullshit. And Oregon supposedly did away with those extensive background checks for people. But guess what? Every landlord can push it, especially if you're trying to get into a place, which this place that I was trying to get into was not an apartment. It was a single family home. Because in my trauma and all of that, I'm not trying to live in an apartment building like the place that they sent me to when I paroled the estates, which is you're right there across from, you know, you got strip clubs, you got the bars, you got the drug dealers, you got the pimps, you got all of that. And while that lifestyle was not my choice and I was forced into it, it's very easy when you keep hitting a brick wall and a brick wall and a brick wall that you're like, at least I know I can make money that way. But like I said in the beginning, my faith is bigger than that, and I never went that road. But how many other men and women have because of that? Because they have reached out and asked for help. And because nobody that has the power, that has the money, is listening. That's the thing. Every one of you in here has power. I have power. I write letters all the time. We all have power. And when we put our voices together, mountains can and will be moved. But you have to be willing to step outside your comfort zone, because every one of you in here has someone that is affected by this, and that's why you're here. At some point in time, there's going to be the next generation and the next generation. Do you want them to be in prison? Do you want them on the streets? Do you want them being kicked in the head and abused just because they lost their job because they were disabled? I met a guy the other day, first time in his life ever homeless. He's in his 70s. He got diagnosed with colon cancer 6 months ago. 2 years prior to that, his wife died. The career that he chose, they let him go because of the cancer treatments. Now he's completely homeless. These are the people that are in our community. It's not all, yes, there are people that are out there and they're in drug addiction and they're in all of these things, but the bigger population is not that. It is not that, 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 not. Wait a minute. Let me do something. Let me talk to that idiot mayor and tell him what he's doing is asinine. Because it really is, right? Thank you. Sorry.
First of all, I just want to say thank you for just all the time and the resources you guys took to get this data. You know, like Molly, you're saying, I have a background in continuous improvement, so I'm thinking, I was like, okay, you guys were able to get 429, participants to get some data. We've housed over thousands of people. It's like, how can we elevate this effort and gather the voices of everyone? So is there any plans to do that, to gather everyone? Because we're still housing people. We can still get this data to elevate this voice. So again, I want to appreciate you guys for doing this. And I'm pissed off that we're 5 years into this system and we don't have a comprehensive feedback mechanism, that we're fully listening to the participants' experiences and really understand their needs, and as well as the service providers who are carrying the burden, the labor burden of providing these services. We're in a really fragile system, and we're a lot of stress points that we're not addressing. And so, again, how can we help this effort going forward? How can we get more, responses to this so we can elevate this issue and elevate this type of work.
Thank you, Rigo. I'm going to answer that one and after Crystal's very impassioned, beautiful speech, sorry, I got to stand up to kind of stretch so I don't start crying because I'm an easy crier. Thank you. You asked, how can we help? Well, one thing is, Centro Cultural can join Welcome Home Coalition. What Crystal said is, there's power in numbers. You all have power in this room. Collective power is powerful. And I actually moderated a panel right before this morning with folks from Los Angeles that are up here visiting, and you'll get to hear them at lunch. And they're badass, and it's so exciting. And people from Seattle, too. And so these are our neighbors to the north and the south, and we need to learn from them. And part of what Roberto from LA was talking about was a robust tenants' rights movement in LA that demands this. Demands, what you're talking about, landlord harassment. In LA, they have a people power movement that says, hell no, we're not gonna, and they've successfully passed a city ordinance that disallows, right? And sometimes those 100%, those types of ordinances are hard to enforce, right? Enforcement mechanisms is a whole other thing. But they have a people movement to rally around it. And we are missing that here in the Portland Metro and in Oregon overall. And so I just want to encourage everybody, if you're not in the Portland Metro, what are the groups or the orgs to get involved with? We need more tenant unions in this state. We don't have, other cities and states have really grassroots power, and that's what creates change, right? Mamdani in New York, that they have a new type of mayor in New York that was a grassroots movement. That's the people saying no more oligarchs. We are done. We are tired of this corrupt two-party system. We are going to do something else. And I really feel that's what Welcome Home is trying to build. That's what we need in the Portland Metro, a real housing justice movement that doesn't, there's a lot of respectability politics in Portland. I'm just gonna be super candid. This is on film on YouTube later. But I'll say it because at this point we have nothing to lose to speak truth to power. There's never nothing to lose, but now in this time, especially with the federal government there's nothing to lose. We need to be bold. We need leaders to be bolder, and we need to be creative and make bold choices. And so, Rigo, you brought up 5 years into this, or if the rest of the people in the room that don't live and breathe, the supportive housing services measure he's referencing is local money that actually, wealthy households and businesses making over $5 million pay a marginal tax. So it's very not burdensome because it's marginal. For businesses, they don't pay anything until it's over $5 million, and they only pay 1% on whatever's over $5 million. And it's producing local money for supportive housing services. But guess what? The majority of it is not being spent on supportive services. And so I think what you're asking is could all the people you're housing at Centro, could we get their feedback on how's it going for them? What's that experience? And then we get it from all the organizations in Welcome Home Coalition, and we bring that to policymakers. I mean, there's next step pressure, but we need to be organized, and that takes it's hard, right? We're a staff of 3 at Welcome Home. We have very little capacity, so I rely on these amazing community leaders and building leadership skills within. But I just invite you all, if this feels passionate to you and interesting, get involved. Like Crystal said, everybody has power, and sometimes sending a letter sounds dumb or sending an email sounds dumb. That's not going to do anything. But when it's 20,000 emails, it does something. It's a numbers game. It really is. So I'll stop there. Is there another question? I think we have a couple minutes.
I'm trying to think of how to ask this question because I am relatively new to the housing space in general. I work at Metro with the regional capacity team, and I am trying to figure out what SHS really is, and I'm trying to figure out, because we're in a weird funder position and we're doing monitoring with counties and all this other stuff, how do we actually support the people doing the work so that we can actually support people in getting housing? So what can Metro do? What can funders do to actually be helpful? That's a question I'm always sitting with.
You want to take it? Thank you for that.
I'm going to speak on a really personal level because I am an unfunded organization. So what Metro can do is hold city council and our mayor and our local government accountable for the way they're spending money. If it doesn't make sense and if it's not the majority voice, then Metro needs to step in. They can't say, we just give the money and we can't tell them what to do. No, actually, you need to tell them what to do because you're giving them money. There are organizations that are doing really, really impactful work on the ground, and we've been doing it for years, and we are not getting the money because we are not having breakfast and coffee with the people who have the money.
Yeah, and I'll just say, since you said you're new at Metro, welcome home. We were engaging with Metro for the last 2 years, and at the end of it, nothing happened. None of our recommendations were adopted, and so at that point, we said, you know what, we need to focus on building that people power because you're not taking us serious. So we're gonna work on building people power, and then we'll get back to Metro, but also what Crystal said. All right, y'all, I think we're almost out of time, so I just want to say thank you for attending this panel, and thank you for all the work you do. You're amazing. And thank you all. Also, if you like paper copies of policy briefs, they're up here for the taken. And there's one-pagers in English and Spanish.